Hey, this is Megan from the White Whisk, and welcome to the Amoretti Test Kitchen. Today we're going to be baking some hazelnut praline scones. These scones will be perfect for the holiday season. They're full of the warm, cozy flavors that we expect during this time of year. So let's go ahead and get started. So we're going to begin by whisking together our dry ingredients. Scones are so easy, and I think you'll be surprised at how easy it is to whip it up on your own at home. So we're going to begin with our flour in a large mixing bowl, and we're going to sprinkle in our cinnamon, a pinch of salt, and baking powder. And then we're going to whisk everything together until it is fully incorporated. All right, now let's set that aside. Next, we're going to whisk together all of our wet ingredients, including our brown sugar. And before I mix the rest in, sometimes I'll give those eggs just a quick whisk just to get them started and make sure they mix in evenly. And then pour in your heavy cream. And then next is the brown sugar. And next, to really kick up the hazelnut praline flavor all throughout the scone, we're gonna add in the Amoretti Hazelnut Praline Artisan. And something I love about the Artisans is how versatile they are, and they really deliver a natural flavoring, natural coloring that really stands out in your desserts. And another great thing about the Artisans is that they are interchangeable. So if you have another Artisan you have your eye on that has the flavor that you're hoping for, you could totally swap them out and add that and create a different flavor of scone. And you'll see as I whisk this together, the Hazelnut Praline Artisan is gonna give these scones a really deep, rich brown color. So whisk that until it's smooth and everything is incorporated. And then we're gonna set that aside as well. Next, we're gonna take our cold butter and we are going to chop it into some smaller cubes. And you can use a bench scraper for this, or you can use a chef's knife, whatever you have on hand. So we're gonna toss these cubes of butter into our dry ingredients. Next, I like to just toss them a little bit in the flour just to make sure they're all separated. And then we're gonna use a pastry cutter to cut the butter into the flour mixture until the pieces are about the size of a pea or smaller. And what this is gonna do is it's gonna give your scone those little pockets of flakiness and tenderness. You wanna make sure to use cold butter for this part of your recipe, because if the butter melts while you're mixing it, you won't get those little pockets in your scones. And every once in a while, just kind of push out those pieces, make sure everything's getting mixed in evenly. Okay, so you can see our mixture here. It's getting closer. We still have a couple of big pieces, so we're gonna make sure we keep working it and keep targeting those larger pieces of the butter. And if at any point your mixture becomes a little bit warm, you feel like the butter's getting a little soft, go ahead and just pop it back in the fridge for a few minutes and then resume once it's chilled. All right, so now we have our mixture here, and we have a lot of pieces that are about this big and smaller. Something else you can do if you don't have one of these at home, no worries. You can also use like a large fork, which will kind of give you the same effect of pressing through those small butter pieces. You can also work it in with your hands if you want to, and just kind of like take the pieces and press them through the butter like that. You might want to chill it a little bit after doing that though, because obviously the heat from your hands will start to melt it a little bit. Okay, so now we are going to create a well in our dry ingredients, and this is where we're gonna pour in the wet ingredients. Make sure to scrape it out with a spatula too and get all of those ingredients in there. Next, we're gonna go ahead and mix our dries into the wet. And you can already see that dark, rich color from the Amoretti Hazelnut Praline Artisan. And before it is fully incorporated, we want to add in our toasted hazelnuts. So that way, while we're stirring them in, we don't overmix the scone dough. So while you still have some flour remaining, add in the toasted hazelnuts. And then fold those in as well. Make sure to target those little pockets of dry ingredients at the bottom, so that way they don't get forgotten about and left behind. Sometimes I'll even just take them and press them in a little bit as we start getting close. So I'm gonna leave this just like this. I can press the dough together now. There's no giant clumps of dry ingredients. So to avoid overmixing, I'm gonna stop right here, and then we're going to put it out onto a floured surface and cut it into our triangles. Next, we're gonna press our scone into a disc that's about 8 inches wide. And then from here, we're gonna use a bench scraper, or once again, you can use a chef's knife if that is what you have. And we're gonna cut it into 8 equal triangles, just like you're cutting a pizza. This is one of my favorite parts of the process. I think it's so satisfying. All right, and there's our triangles. So now we're gonna move them to a baking sheet, and we're gonna bake them for 14 to 16 minutes. And one more note, if you are hoping to bake these at a later time, you can totally freeze them at this point. So you can put them on a baking sheet and freeze them, and then put them in a Ziploc bag once they're frozen, and then you can take them out when you wanna bake them and have them fresh that day. So that is an option as well. So as you're placing them on the pan, give them just a little bit of space in between. Space them out evenly once you get them all on there. You can scooch them around if you need to. And they're ready to go in the oven. We're gonna bake the scones at 400 degrees for 14 to 16 minutes. Next, we're gonna work on our hazelnut praline glaze to go on top of our scones. So in a small saucepan over medium heat, you're gonna mix together your brown sugar, the butter, the milk, and just a pinch of salt. So we're just gonna stir this together and let that all get nice and melted. And the reason I opted for a brown sugar glaze on this recipe is because the hazelnut praline has a lot of warm, nutty notes to it. And so the brown sugar is just gonna further reinforce the cozy flavors in this scone. And as you're mixing up your glaze, you can kind of chop it with your spatula a little bit, help it along and get that butter melting faster. So as we are mixing, we are going to look for the point where the brown sugar is dissolved. We want this glaze to be nice and smooth, and letting this brown sugar dissolve is gonna help it not have as much of a gritty texture. All right, so you can see that glaze bubbling a little bit, so now we know that it's heating up and that sugar is dissolving. So now I'm gonna set this aside to allow it to cool for 5 minutes, and then we're gonna add in our powdered sugar and our Amoretti hazelnut praline flavor. So next we are going to add even more of that hazelnut praline flavor into our glaze by adding a half a tablespoon of the hazelnut praline Artisan. And once again, you're gonna see it give it that gorgeous, dark, rich brown shade. And once that's whisked in, we are going to add in our powdered sugar in a few increments. Add in the remaining powdered sugar. And we're gonna whisk it up until it's all smooth. And this glaze does set fairly quickly, so make sure you are ready to go with your scones ready and have them all set out to do the glaze. If you find your glaze isn't quite the consistency you're hoping for, you can always thin it by adding a little bit of additional milk, or you can thicken it by adding a little bit more powdered sugar. So you can play with it around until it's the consistency that you'd like. Next, we're gonna be adding our glaze into a piping bag, and just a tip to make life a lot easier of getting it into the bag itself, use a tall glass or pitcher or anything like that, and then put your piping bag in and just fold it over the edges. And just a reminder to work quickly because that scone glaze will begin to set. Another little tip, if you don't have any piping bags at your home, you can also use a small plastic bag and then seal it up and then cut the corner off, just like we're about to do with the piping bag. This is gonna give you a nice, easy way to drizzle that glaze on in a uniform line. And here comes the fun part. We're gonna drizzle on our hazelnut praline glaze. We're just gonna move our hand back and forth and make nice, quick lines. And just keep drizzling. You can put as little or as much as you like. If you prefer scones having like a complete covering of glaze, you can double this glaze recipe and you'll have enough to do that. And before the glaze sets, I like to stop halfway and then sprinkle on the remaining toasted hazelnuts. And then we'll go finish off the rest. And there you have it. We have finished up our hazelnut praline scones. Thank you so much for joining me today in the Amoretti Test Kitchen. If you enjoyed the recipe, feel free to let us know in the comments below. And if you're looking for more recipes, you can find mine at thewhitewhisk.com. If you'd like to follow along on social media, you can find me on Instagram as @the.white.whisk. And you can also find Amoretti on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, and Pinterest as @Amoretti. I hope you enjoyed the scone recipe today. Hope you have a happy holiday season.